Today, we're diving into one of the most incredible turning points in all of history. I'm talking about the exact moment the medieval world started to crack apart and our own modern world began to rise from the ashes. So, how did it all go down?
I intend to go on making money until I drop dead. Now that's a quote from a guy named Jacob Fugger, a German banker. And you know, that single sentence tells you everything you need to know about the massive shift that was coming. In the medieval world, your life was pretty much set. You had your God-given place in society. But Fugger, he was all about something new, making as much money as humanly possible. That was a radical idea back then.
And let me tell you, this guy wasn't kidding. Fugger came from humble beginnings. His dad was a weaver, but he went to Venice, learned these brand new accounting tricks, and built an absolute financial empire. Just how powerful was he? Get this, in 1519, he basically bankrolled an election for the Holy Roman Emperor. He loaned a family, the Habsburgs, what would be millions today, so they could bribe their way into power. It's a perfect example of how the rules were changing. Suddenly, money was starting to shout louder than your family name.
Okay, so to really grasp how insane a figure like Fugger was, we've got to take a step back and look at the world he was born into. Because medieval Europe, well, it wasn't a place for go-getters. It was a world built on rigid rules, a place where everyone had an assigned spot, supposedly by God's own design.
Think of feudalism as the basic operating system for the entire era. See, after the Roman Empire fell, Europe was just chaos. Feudalism was the solution they came up with. It was basically a giant decentralized network of mutual obligations, all designed for one thing: security. A local lord would give you land and protection, and in return, you owed him your loyalty and service. Everything, and I mean everything, was based on who controlled the land.
And society was sliced into three very distinct pieces. You had those who prayed, that's the clergy. You had those who fought, the nobles, the knights. And then you had pretty much everyone else, those who worked, the peasants. And that last group made up a whopping 85% of the population. 85%. Your future was basically locked in the day you were born.
So what about the political map? Well, you can just throw your modern map of Europe right out the window. It was a complete mess, a patchwork quilt of hundreds of tiny states. We're talking duchies, city-states, little principalities, all with their own rules, their own loyalties, and their own armies. It wasn't a continent of countries. It was just a chaotic maze of local powers. So you have this rigid, fragmented, static world, and then 3 new inventions show up. And these inventions weren't just improvements, they were like dynamite. They were about to blow the foundations of this entire society to bits.
What were they? Gunpowder, the printing press, and the compass. Any one of these would have been a game changer, but all 3 at once, they completely rewrote the rules for everything. For war, for knowledge, for the very shape of the world.
All right, let's start with gunpowder. For centuries, the rock star of the battlefield was the armored knight on his warhorse, right? They were like the medieval equivalent of a tank. But then gunpowder comes along, and suddenly that knight is obsolete. A peasant with a simple rifle could take him down, a cannon could blast through his castle walls. All of a sudden, winning a war wasn't about who had the bravest nobles, it was about who had the cash to buy the most guns and the biggest cannons.
Next up, the printing press. Now, it's hard for us to imagine, but before Johannes Gutenberg, books were incredibly rare and expensive. To make just one Bible, you needed the hides of over 170 calves. Can you believe that? But after the printing press, information just exploded. Look at these numbers. It wasn't just about more people learning to read. It was about ideas, and really dangerous, revolutionary ideas spreading like wildfire, way faster than any king or pope could ever hope to contain them.
And you know, that 150,000 number, that's the low estimate. Some experts think it was actually closer to 200,000 books a year. This was literally the birth of mass media. It was a cultural revolution on a scale nobody had ever seen before.
And the last of our 3 disruptors, the compass. It sounds so simple, but combined with better ship designs, it completely changed how Europeans saw the world. The vast ocean wasn't a terrifying barrier anymore. It was a highway. And they were about to take that highway to places that would completely and permanently redraw the world map.
And just look at how fast this happened. It's absolutely mind-blowing. We're talking about a period of just 30 years. That's a single generation. In that short time, the entire European understanding of the planet was just shattered and then rebuilt from scratch.
Columbus, da Gama, Magellan, these guys didn't just find new places, they plugged the entire world together for the first time. But there's a flip side to this story of discovery, a really dark one. For the people who already lived in the Americas, this wasn't an age of discovery, it was an apocalypse. Just listen to this account from a Mayan chronicle. It's just devastating. For them, the Europeans didn't bring treasure or enlightenment, they brought death. Death on a scale that is almost impossible to imagine.
The sheer scale of this tragedy is it's hard to wrap your head around it. And the deadliest weapon the Europeans had wasn't a sword or a gun, it was germs. Diseases they were immune to, like smallpox and the flu, just ripped through the native populations. In Mexico alone, the population crashed from about 25 million people down to maybe 1 million in less than 100 years. This was without a doubt one of the worst demographic disasters in the history of humankind.
So, okay, we have these massive changes happening all at once. Gunpowder armies, information spreading everywhere, and a whole new world being conquered. How did all of this circle back and change Europe itself? Well, it basically created the political world that you and I live in right now, the world of the modern nation-state. First off, let's talk about people. For a long time, Europe was still recovering from the Black Death, but now populations were finally starting to bounce back. Between 1500 and 1600, you see millions more people in places like France. The British Isles population jumped by over 50%. And what do more people mean? Well, they mean more soldiers, more sailors, and, most importantly for rulers, more taxpayers. All of this was the fuel needed to build bigger, more powerful countries.
And the countries themselves started to look different. Kings and queens, especially in places like France, Spain, and England, started to consolidate their power. They built professional governments, they started collecting taxes directly from the people, and they raised armies that were loyal only to them, not to some local lord. They were called the new monarchies. And what they were doing was systematically taking apart that old feudal system and pulling all the power to the center.
So you step back and look at all of this chaos, this incredible clash of the old world and the new, this massive wave of both discovery and destruction. It makes you wonder, right? What's the takeaway? What are we actually left with from this incredibly turbulent time?
Well, pretty much everything. The very foundations of our modern world were poured during this period. The whole idea of countries with borders, that started here. A global economy where things are traded across oceans, that started here. The power of mass media to shape what people think, you guessed it, that started here too. And it left us with this really complicated legacy, a story of incredible progress and innovation that is forever tied to a story of brutal conquest and destruction.
Maybe a writer from that time, Michel de Montaigne, said it best. He looked around and saw what was happening, the ambition, the incredible discoveries, but also the horrifying reality. He wrote about entire nations being destroyed. And for what? Not for some grand, noble cause, but as he put it, for the traffic of pearls and pepper, for profit. And that, I think, is just a stunning reminder of the complex, messy, and often contradictory forces that really built the world we live in today.